Hey, I'm Hallie, and with Hurricane Ian making history as it's making landfall, we are seeing the biggest concern as we come on the air, the back of this eye wall hitting Florida as we speak. A super destructive, very dangerous phase in this Category 4 storm. You see the track. It's just shy of a Cat 5. The fifth most powerful storm measured by wind speed to ever hit the U.S., 155 miles an hour. And look at what's happening live right now. You are looking at a split screen here of Punta Gorda, Florida, and the south end of the Skyway Bridge in Tampa Bay. The rain is intense. It is coming down in sheets. Look at that one camera. It is barely hanging on. Here in Naples, check this out. Cars basically underwater, right up to the windshield, drifting down the block because it's so flooded. The National Hurricane Center says those storm surges could be historic in this area, maybe up to 18 feet. And everybody in the state, look at that, can expect flooding. You know, emergency crews, they're trying to do the best they can, but look at these firefighters unloading what looks to be a flooded out fire truck, trying to save at least some of the equipment inside. If you did not evacuate, it is too late. Nobody's coming to get you, at least not right now. At people's homes, look at this, Cape Coral, it is ripping them apart. We've got our team of reporters posted up all across Florida. We're going to get you the forecast in just a second, but I want to start tonight with Carrie Sanders, who is in Punta Gorda, Florida, now under a curfew. And Carrie, I know you've covered a lot of hurricanes here. I've seen you get blown around. The rain, the wind, it is all incredibly intense. Tell me what you're seeing.
Well, we're on the dirty side of the eye wall. We didn't have that perfect clean eye with the blue skies, but now the backside's beginning to come through. So the wind's just beginning to pick back up. We've had a period of time here that have been really quite calm, even though we couldn't see the skies or the birds flying around. It brought a lot of the residents out to start walking around, taking a look, taking pictures. They're now heading back inside because the wind is picking back up. And we're likely to see stronger winds on the backside than we did on the front side. I was standing out sort of in this area. You can see a car driving around. I think I see him actually holding a cell phone as he's driving, taking some videos. We had winds here that were at about clocked at 110 miles an hour. I think we're going to see the stronger winds on the backside, but we already know that power has been knocked out to a good portion of Charlotte County. We know that there have been some roofs that have had some serious damage. Of course, buildings are leaking, and so there's a lot of water that's coming in. And what we haven't seen here is that storm surge yet. In fact, we saw the opposite. The counterclockwise rotation of the hurricane sucked the water out of Charlotte Harbor, sucked it out of the Peace River. It was actually kind of interesting to see that. But on the back end, we may actually see that storm surge come in. What we saw to the south of us down in Naples, that storm surge could actually hit here. The only other thing I might mention is there were a lot of people who decided during this hurricane, you know what, I should have evacuated and I didn't. And just before we really got the intense winds, people started coming in their cars and going to a parking garage and driving up to the second, third floor. Folks who had dogs and cats with them, just getting in there saying, you know what, we're not going to ride it out in our house. We're going to ride it out in our car inside a well-constructed, very heavy concrete parking garage. And so they're there right now waiting for this to all end. The heaviest winds, the strongest winds, if we continue to watch the movement here, might be at around 7:30, 8 o'clock. But the hurricane, the rain, all of everything going on, it's going to take till at least midnight before we get to that point of, okay, we're past the really heavy aspects of this. But then begins we're going to wait for the daylight to really do the assessment of the damage.
And I want to just be clear to people, because right now, Carrie, it doesn't look like you're standing in much, right? I mean, it looks like you're standing on a rainy day in Florida. That's because, that's what I'm saying. You're going to get hammered here in a second. And what's so interesting about this particular storm is sometimes it's not the backside that can be more intense. In this instance, it may very well be where you are.
Exactly. I mean, usually have this really well-defined eye, and you look up and you say to yourself, I can't believe it's such a blue sky. We don't have that here. It's dirty. But nonetheless, we're in that lull in the middle of the rotation of the hurricane. And when that backside comes, the strongest winds are right in the eye wall. And so when that backside hits here, that's when we're going to see it ramp up tremendously. Wind speeds, everybody wants to know Category 4, Category 5. I just say from my experience, once you're at a major hurricane, a 4 or 5, I don't think there's really that dramatically of a difference. I mean, we have tornadoes that get spun out of here. There will be some calculations of what the speeds were of the wind. at the end of the day, it's the destruction, and hopefully, we don't have reports of anybody being seriously injured, but it takes a while to get that kind of information. Hopefully, everybody is safe.
At this point, in some ways, the fact that it is a Cat 4, just shy of a Cat 5, is an interesting data point, but functionally on the ground, the difference between 155 miles an hour and 160 miles an hour, you're getting crushed. You know what I mean? And I'm hearing something in the back of your live shot, Carrie. Is that an alarm going off? I assume that's happening all over town.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It actually has been driving us crazy. It is an alarm going off. So when the power went out, the alarms started firing, and that's inside one of the garage buildings down here. And it's been going like that, and I assume until the battery dies, and who knows whether the battery will die. So, the city made it very clear that their fire officials, their city employees, nobody's going to go out until the storm is completely gone. So, yeah, that adds actually a little bit to the anxiety when you keep hearing this sound, because it is an alarm, and we're in the middle of a hurricane and everything else. But it's kind of what you expect. It's like a car alarm. When somebody knocks a car, nobody seems to pay attention to it anymore, but it just keeps irritating you.
Carrie Sanders, stand by. I know we're coming back to you later on in the show. Thank you. Let me get to Bill Cairns now with the track here. And Bill, let me just make clear that while people are looking at Carrie's shot, the level of urgency here is incredibly real, right? It is incredibly intense. Can we pull up, I don't know if we can, some more of those live pictures that we have of, I know, the Tampa Bay Bridge, for example, the Sky Bridge. You've got a couple of others. This is it. I mean, it is pounding the southwest coast. It made landfall officially maybe 90 minutes ago, roughly 100 minutes ago now at this point, and now it's going to slow down. That's the risk, that's the danger, because this pummeling is going to continue.
And Hallie, just stop for a second. You just had a 5-minute conversation with a reporter in the eye of a Category 4 hurricane. I mean, that just blows your mind that we even have the technology to even bring you those pictures. And if you check in back with if you check back in with our crew there and Carrie in about 30 minutes, he's going to start getting into that northwestern dirty quadrant of the backside of the storm, and it's going to pour, and he's going to have like 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So here's where Carrie is located, pretty much under the center of our icon here, showing you where the storm is. But you notice the dark reds closing in? I mean, it's pouring in Venice right now. The winds are howling all the way down to Inglewood. We got a damage being done on the backside here. So the winds were going one way. Then as the eye passes you, they go in the other way. So things that got loosened up one direction, now the wind's going to attack it from the other direction, and we're going to have even more stuff flying around and getting destroyed. But that's what's going to head into Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda in about the next, I'd say, a half hour at least, and then definitely right through. But I think about 2 to 3 hours to get to the back side of this. We have really extreme conditions returning now to Captiva and Sanibel, and poor Fort Myers. They didn't have much of a break. They really didn't go through the center of the eye, so the winds have been howling pretty good here. And as far as damage goes, we'll see a lot more in the days ahead. But just from this storm track, wind damage, most extreme, is going to be areas from Fort Myers, probably northwards. The worst storm surge will be from Fort Myers to Bonita Springs down to Naples. That's kind of the target zone of what we've been looking at. And of course, Carrie mentioned it, the 123-mile-per-hour wind gusts that we had before their gauge stopped working there in Punta Gorda. Right now, we're gusting 75 in Sarasota, so we're up there about a hurricane strength. The same with Venice. Tampa's up to around 60, and that's what you're going to expect in the Tampa area. Kind of what you have now is as bad as it's going to get, assuming we don't have any tornadoes, which will be possible overnight. The rain has really tapered off in Naples, and the water's beginning to recede. So that's good. We need to get these people rescued that are, demanding and asking and calling for help. Hopefully we can do that before sunset. Hopefully the winds will come down enough. But that water is still very high, especially around that Bonita Springs, the Fort Myers area. The wind is just coming in straight in that southern eye, right off the water, and it's just not allowing it to recede back out into the ocean like you'd expect. So here's the new update from the Hurricane Center, 140-mile-per-hour winds. So we're still at Category 4. The next update will probably likely go down to a Category 3, and then during the overnight hours, likely by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, possibly a Category 1 hurricane. So here we are at 2 a.m., Category 1 heading over Osceola and Polk counties here, and then slowly trying to work its way up towards Universal Studios, Orlando International Airport, Orlando area, and then heading out towards maybe the Space Coast, the Titusville region, up to Daytona Beach. It looks like that's the area. Maybe New Smyrna Beach is right where they have it exiting exiting off the coast here, and that would be tomorrow afternoon as a tropical storm. So because it's taking more of a track off the coast, it's not going to have enough time to weaken significantly. Then we're still taking this as a tropical storm. I mean, it's not out of the realm that we could have this as a hurricane making landfall Friday afternoon between Savannah and Charleston. Right now, the Hurricane Center has it at 65-mile-per-hour winds. They have hurricane watches that are up for coastal areas of Georgia and South Carolina. Will it be what we just saw in the extreme damage that you're going to see in the days ahead from where we just had the landfall? It won't be anything like that. But still, for the people that live here, this is very concerning. These areas are very flood prone, especially when you get the heavy rain and a storm surge combination. So that's going to be a big concern in the days ahead. So hurricane warnings here, hurricane watches from Daytona Beach all the way up to Charleston. As we just keep having these storms, Hallie, that like Fiona. They're overachieving, and the ocean temperatures are a big reason for it. That's the fuel for these storms.
It's the climate connection there. Bill Cairns, thank you. I know you're standing by also. We're coming back to you. Let me get to Steve Patterson, who is in St. Petersburg. And the big concern tonight is the rain. 2 to 3 months of rain in like 2 to 3 days. And just looking at your live shot here, the wind is intense where you are. Not 155 miles an hour, obviously, but it is certainly a lot.
Enough to cause problems and do some damage, Hallie, and that's really what officials are worried about as we speak. We're going to get to the rain when we get to the rain. And look, there's plenty of rain to go around right now, but that deluge is going to come later. Right now is this wind event. It is the direct brunt of the lashings of the eye of the storm that have made landfall a few hours ago. Now we're feeling the wind gusts pretty solid. I would say every few seconds we get a good one, and you'll see one in the next few seconds, I guarantee you. But for now, we can update you on power outages, about 100,000 between the counties that make up Tampa Bay. So not as many as we thought, but I guarantee you there will be more as the night progresses. And we've heard, obviously reports of power lines, reports of flash flooding. The flooding, though, as this continues, as that storm slows, as the back end of the storm starts lashing us as well, as the storm surge, because the bay has gone out into the Gulf. If I were to show you down there, you'd see the tide has moved out. That will come back with a vengeance. We're expecting about a 4 to 6 foot storm surge. When that hits, combined with the deluge that you're talking about, it's going to get really bad here really fast. But for right now, it's the wind. Hallie?
Only pockets of people who have power along the coast where you are, right, Steve?
Only pockets, correct. Only pockets. You're going to find, a cluster of people with lights and another cluster. But after that, it's darkness. Back to you.
Steve Patterson out there in St. Pete. We should note for folks, too, because this is what we do in the show. The safety is the first priority for Steve and for his crew, and for Carrie and for his crew, and for Morgan Chesky, who is joining us now, and his crew. And our teams always know that is the most important thing. I want to be really clear about that, because I think, Morgan, as you well know, people see us, reporters, teams of news crews out in the thick of it, and go, what are they doing here? We are prepared. We are trying to be smart about this. Where you are, I know we got an update from the mayor, right, of Tampa, who luckily, right, Tampa's avoiding the worst of this storm. It's hitting further south, but it's not like you're out of the woods.
Right, I mean, certainly Tampa feels like it dodged a bullet here, Hallie, but we're not out of the woods just yet. That was the main message from the mayor earlier today, and that's because now that Ian has made landfall, we're likely going to be seeing an incredible amount of rain here. The brunt of this hurricane not expected to hit Tampa proper until anywhere from 9 to midnight tonight. And the numbers really are wild, Hallie. 12 to 24 inches of rain forecast over the next 48 hours. So as you mentioned, 2 to 3 months of rain in 2 to 3 days. Hours ago, we heard from the city that there were already reports of flooding in low-lying areas. That's only going to get worse as the night goes on, although, we're not going to be able to see it. We're going to have the cover of darkness here. That's going to make things even more treacherous, and that's why at this hour they're telling everyone, stay inside. And if you did happen to evacuate days ago and you think, hey, it's okay to come back home because Tampa's not getting the brunt of Ian when it made landfall, now is not the time to return back home. So that's the main message tonight. And we have seen the bands from Ian make their way over here. Stronger winds, stronger rain, stronger wind, stronger rain. But the real telling thing that everyone's watching is how slow Ian starts to move when it churns its way inland. If it goes down to 3-4 miles an hour, it could drop an incredible amount of rain, similar to what we saw with Hurricane Harvey over Houston that flooded nearly the entire city. Hallie?
Morgan, we talk about the power outages here. We've learned that there are just over 1 million people who do not have power in the state. We know that there are a lot of people who live in Tampa, 380,000 of them, as you point out, not directly on the coast. You know, they can't get anywhere. Airports are shut down. Bridges are shut down. We showed that live shot of, I think, that Tampa Bay bridge, the Sky Bridge, which is closed. Marco Island, roads and bridges are impassable further south of where you are, as we look at some time lapses here. Near where, Marco Island, the eye made landfall here. If you are still there, if you are on some of these barrier islands, and I talked to one mayor who said people still are, there is no way to get off. You're done, right, until this storm actually passes by.
Yeah, unfortunately, those folks in those outlying areas are going to be facing a tough 48, 72 hours ahead until emergency officials can get back there and start the long process of cleaning up, of recovering from Hurricane Ian. And if you look down the entire coast of Florida, there are countless communities that are like that. And that was a serious concern when you saw just the sheer size of Ian as it churned its way through the Gulf and made its way towards Florida. Right now, we're still getting preliminary reports about some of those outlying areas, the extent of the damage there. We do know from the stunning images we've seen along the coast in Naples, Florida, with streets already underwater, you can only imagine the extent of the damage in those outlying areas. But I think right now it's very much a dynamic situation. Even though Ian has made landfall and we've seen the destruction that it's unleashed upon those coastal communities, we're really watching its toll play out in real time as it marches across Florida. Already 1 million Floridians without power, as you mentioned. That number likely to go even higher. And I really do feel like the flooding is going to be such an issue going forward with the forecast calling for so much rain and the fact that this could really become a slow-moving storm here in the state of Florida. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky, live for us there in Tampa. Thank you. Let me bring in now Florida State Senator Jana Cruz, who represents District 18, the Tampa area there. Thank you so much for being with us. I see you on your balcony. Tell me what you're seeing, what you're hearing from folks in your neighborhood.
This is just the beginning. You know, we're 102 miles away from where this hurricane made landfall, and this is nothing. This is just wind, and you can see the resiliency of a palm tree, but you know, we're expecting as much as 24 inches of rain in the next 24 hours. This is just the beginning. We have wind gusts that are blowing everything around. And when the rain starts, it's going to get very serious. And we are going to experience flooding like we have never seen before here in Tampa. And I'm a Tampa native. Family, been here for 4 generations. And, you know, the oceans are different now, and the storms are much more violent than I've seen in a long time. So I tell people, shelter in place. It's too late now to relocate. Stay in place and stay safe. But this is really something out here.
At what point do you anticipate going into recovery mode, if you will? The storm is still very active. As you note, it is passing by you in Tampa to the south, as we're looking at the track on the other side of the screen here, coming up through the central part of the state. What is the plan for, let's say, first thing tomorrow morning?
First thing tomorrow morning, the first thing I tell people is don't drive through moving or standing water. Water, like 2 feet of water can disable a vehicle around here. So I beg people not to decide that they need to be out and about to go see the damage. They need to stay home and not drive a car through this flood. And if you have a big truck and you think that you can drive through the flood, please don't do that, because when you do that, you move water into people's yards and possibly into their homes. So let's just stay put. Hopefully you're prepared and we can wait for the water to recede.
Janet Cruz, state senator from the Tampa area. Thank you so much for being with us. A lot of folks thinking about you and your community and, of course, the rest of the Gulf Coast there in Florida. Hallie Velshi is there on the Gulf Coast, specifically in Naples. And, Hallie, you have been in it for the last, I think, 2 hours, two and a half hours or so.
Yeah.
Roads still flooded, I assume. Tell me what you're seeing, because you have a very dramatic shot where you are.
Yeah. Well, here's the other dramatic part, how much it's changed. Take a look at this. You can see the ground. By the way, this is a tarmac ground, but now it's all sand because that's all the water.
Well, wait a second. Let me make sure that I understand what I'm seeing. This is sand and road, basically. Can I just tell people who might not?
Yes.
I don't know if we have the shot. If we have, I'm going to ask our team. If we have the video from Hallie Velshi, not even an hour ago, you couldn't see the color of these cars.
It was under several feet of water.
I wouldn't be able to tell that was a white car. Yeah, they were underwater.
Yeah, right.
Look at that. That's what it looked like. We're showing people what it looked like 1 hour ago, right? And so is this because of the power of the hurricane basically sucking the water back out?
It is two things. Part of it is that, and part of it is that at 3:20 p.m. Eastern is when we hit high tide here. So the tide itself is receding under normal circumstances. Like that would normally be happening anyway. So you're seeing two things happen here. However, you did see all the impact of all of those cars that had been moved. They were all nicely aligned in a row, and they were parked, and they've all floated off. You can see the ground. I want to ask Randy to bring us over here and take a look at the ocean, which is much, much calmer. It's still a rough ocean. It's the Gulf of Mexico, but it's much calmer, and the direction of the water has changed. The direction earlier was coming toward us from the back of your screen toward you. Now it's going from the left, from the right to the left. So the storm direction has changed, which always happens on the back of a storm. And if you look down here, Randy, this Hallie was where the water was coming in from the right to the left, the storm surge. You hardly see that now. You see a little bit of it. The water has now gone back into the Gulf of Mexico.
Under you
now again,
an hour ago.
There was a fridge, right. So things have changed fairly dramatically here, but this is a moving storm. So there are parts of Florida where things are really bad, and with each passing hour, we're finding out about more power outages, far more than 1 million people now. I haven't seen the last update, but I'm assuming it just keeps going up with each one. We had a report from a town where the wastewater reservoir is about to be overtopped, and that's a big problem when wastewater starts getting into public drainage water. So there's a lot that's wrong here. A lot that needs to be fixed. And the problem with this, Hallie, is people who sort of say, all right, I've dodged a bullet, the worst is over, let me go out. There's nothing but debris. See, as the water recedes, there's all sorts of debris. There's tables, there's gates, there's dangerous stuff, there's siding, there's doors, and if you your car can start to float in 6 inches of water, a foot of water. There's still way more than a foot of water, as you can see with those cars down there. So it's not solved. It's not even close to over. And in parts of Florida, this is still just hitting. There's still going to be trees and poles coming down, still going to be power lines taken out. But at least we can start to see what the back of it looks like. But it's not going to be, even in Naples, it's not going to be until tomorrow that emergency services start to come out and assess the damage, get tow trucks to pull these cars out. It's a while.
I was just going to ask, because that's been a key part of this storyline, as I've talked with some officials up and down the coast, mayors, emergency services folks. They've said, listen, our people cannot get out. They cannot actually get through this, even when it looks like what it looks like where you are at this point.
Yeah. And I remind you, I'm here behind a wall. If I lean over here into the wind, you hear the wind. You hear it's still a very, very windy day out here. It's too windy for people to be fixing power lines. Look at that. Something just came down over there. I guess there we go. Look at that. A very light paddle board. But that stuff's still flying around. Stuff's still dangerous. They can't fix power lines. They can't do that stuff, and they need to evaluate it. And there's still going to be people who, have heart attacks and need ambulances and need to get to the hospital. So they want people off the road. They don't want more people stuck. They want people to just sit this out and let them take care of it tomorrow. But the good news is we will probably see the sunset on Naples tonight with the worst of the damage behind us, and then tomorrow they will begin evaluating. For Naples, because there's so much infrastructure here, they'll probably get the electricity up fairly soon. But, there are parts of Florida, particularly on the West Coast, that are not nearly that developed. And that could take days to weeks to get power and water in a good position. So a lot more to come.
Well, and this is, you talk about the cleanup alley and the long road ahead. This is the same area that got walloped by Charlie, roughly the same area 18 years ago. I mean, that was a tens of $20+ billion of cleanup.
and a much smaller storm. So yeah, that's there's going to be a lot of work to be done here.
Hallie Velshi live for us there in Naples. Thank you. As the eye of the storm now, as you saw, is passing over many members of our team who are on the coast. We are watching for what happens when the backside of this Category 4 hurricane whips around and makes its way onto land. We're also going to talk with a former FEMA administrator who says the storm surge from hurricanes past, like Charlie, which we just referenced, don't even come close to this. We'll be right back. You are taking a live look right now. You are about to be where we expect to see Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida give a briefing and update on what is happening with Hurricane Ian, this Category 4 storm, just shy of a Category 5. We're going to monitor that. We'll bring you any highlights as we get it. I want to go back now to Punta Gorda, where Kerry Sanders is. And Kerry, you know, Bill Cairns made, I think, an important and rather remarkable point. As I appreciate your photographer there wiping down the lens, you're standing in the eye of this Category 4 monster. I mean, you are, right? Like, this is it is extraordinary that we can speak to you while you are literally in the eye of the hurricane. There is more coming for you.
There is more coming for us, and I think we're pretty close to it, because when I last talked to you, you may have noticed it wasn't raining. Well, the rain is now beginning to fall, and that means that we're pretty close to probably seeing the back eye
Kerry,
of this wall.
who's behind you? Just out of curiosity, like, who's
through.
out and about in this storm right now? I mean, it's the eye, but what's up?
I've met these guys. I met these guys earlier. They're from Texas. They have a YouTube channel. They do extreme weather, and so they've been out and about. They're walking around. That's Matt and Michael. They're two brothers from Texarkana, I think. If you're listening to what I'm listening to, and I don't know whether it's coming through, those are the warnings we've been getting on our cell phones, which remarkably the cell phone system's still working, telling us about tornado threats. So there continues to be tornado threats. And, you know, it can be deceptive, because you and I are talking, as you said, it seems relatively calm right now. It can feel like the hurricane is over. This hurricane is not over. We still have a tremendous amount more to deal with. And I think I mentioned earlier, we may actually see some storm surge here. The storm surge to the south was dramatic, and we may actually see the same thing or something similar like that here.
What is the expectation for the storm surge?
Well, the prediction started out at like 8 to 10 feet, then it went up to 12, and then it went all the way up to 17. You know, it's hard to say. Where I'm standing right now, I'm just 2 blocks from Charlotte Harbor, where it meets up with the Peace River, and so if it does happen, it's coming right where we are. I mean, the water will come in. If people are wondering about, well, what will we do to, retreat? Our retreat would be to the 2nd and 3rd stories of the parking garage, where many of the folks who left their homes, like hurricane refugees, because they decided not to ride it out at the last minute, are currently in their cars right now. But, as we are in the middle of this, waiting for the backside, and then we know it's going to be nighttime, and so it'll be too dark to do any sort of assessments. And that's an indication, actually, that the wind is beginning to pick up. And
right.
I should point out, the wind is now coming from a different direction. So there's hardly any wind out here, but we're going to get the wind. And it's, you got to remember that. So we've been standing here, the wind has been coming this direction, and now it's going to start coming this direction. And so everything moves, including us. So I'll take you right now. We've been using this building. Yeah, I've been using this building here to protect us. So you have, like the brick building. You've got all of this. This was protecting us from the wind that was coming at us this direction. Now when the wind comes at us this direction, we have to move to another location where we have, again, the building protecting us, and there's moments where I can step out, show you what's going on, but then get back into a safe area.
Tell me more about the people who are in this parking garage, Kerry, because I'm struck by, and I spoke with one of the Charlotte County officials just a couple of hours ago, about half of the people in this county are over the age of 65. Not particularly surprising for a popular retiree spot, right, in Florida. But when you have such a number of older folks who are in one location, that presents new challenges. I think you were saying that some of them people of all ages have gotten into this parking garage because they initially didn't want to leave, and then at the last minute thought, maybe I don't want to stay home, so let me bring the dog and the cat and pop in the car.
So I'll sort of paint the picture for you. James Brown right now, he goes, that's my name. I can't sing. He and his dog, Oliver, are right now in the car, in the back seat. He's trying to calm the dog down because the dog's never been through something like this. He seems to be relatively relaxed. He feels safe. His wife has joined him. So they're all there. They brought some food. They brought some water. There's another car right next to them. A young woman, she's 71 years old, but a very pleasant woman by the name of Constance is inside her vehicle with her cat Joey, and Joey is crawling all over the car. She says that her cat has never been inside the car and so is exploring and also a little skittish with a Cat 4 storm. The other cars there, well, I met a family. They're from Indiana. They just moved here. They have never been through a hurricane. That's Cindy and Kevin Flavo, I think was I can't remember their last name. Anyway, they just moved here. This is their first hurricane. I said, are you scared? And Kevin said, you know, I'm anxious. And I understand that anxiety because you don't know what is coming next. I mean, in the same way that we're standing here waiting for the backside of this storm to arrive and the eye wall with the strongest winds, you know, because you don't know, that anxiety is just a very natural human reaction.
That's
Hallie.
right. That makes total sense. Carrie Sanders, thank you. And thank you, by the way, Carrie, for pulling back the curtain and giving us more of a sense of where you are, how you and your team stay safe. I think that's really important. We really appreciate you being there. As you, I know, are bracing now for the second half of this storm. We'll have more of that coverage live. Let me bring back Bill Cairns for the latest on the storm's trajectory. So we had that update at the top of the hour, Bill, on the path, right? The new warnings for places like North and South Carolina of storm surges. And I see that you also have looked at what we're seeing so far from this storm. As we have this, it's so weird, Bill. It feels like this moment of relative peace in what has been a very intense day of storm coverage. It's not going to last.
Yeah, I always call this moment kind of like the fog after the storm. It's like you get the landfall, you know it's not going to get any stronger, so it's just starting to get weaker from here. And we get to the point where, like, you know, some of our crews are down because the winds are too strong right now, so you're not giving you the pictures and the drama, the buildup. But there's still a lot of damage being done. I mean, there's still trees falling down. There's still people.
That's the key part, right?
Right. So it's still happening. It's just it's hard for us to move with the storm as we go throughout, you know, the entire evening and even, you know, tomorrow. We do our best to place our crews along the line of the storm. But yeah, there's always this little. I always call it, like, it's almost like the fog of war. You don't really know what's always going on. It won't be until like the next day or two. I mean, remember Katrina? We didn't even know how bad it was till like 2 days later, you know, when we had all the levees break. So as far as the winds have gone, some of our gauges did hold up pretty well and gave us some of the gusts. I mean, Port Charlotte was 105, Naples 112. So this was a very powerful storm when it made landfall with the winds. So, I mean, we obviously, you know, it made landfall as 150. That's the estimated strongest winds, but, you know, we actually measured that were some in the 120 range. Here's some other, Sanibel Island 106, Venice 82 even, Fort Myers 92. But that could have been higher than this. That stopped working. That's going to happen in these storms. So tonight, one of the biggest fears that we have, now that the storm surge is pretty much peaked and will start to slowly recede from here, is what happens with the freshwater flooding. We've been in this rare high risk of flash flooding from areas from Jacksonville to Daytona Beach, includes all the Orlando area. And that's where the heaviest rain is going to fall tonight. If we get any of those totals that could be up there to 2 feet, that's where they would occur. It's that I-4 corridor northwards up I-95 to Daytona Beach into Flagler County here, including all of Volusia County. So it's kind of rainfall totals. Florida has sandy soil. It can soak it up, but 2 feet of rain is going to saturate eventually, and there's going to be water places that don't typically see it. So we'll have to watch out for flash flood warnings as we go throughout the night. And here's a closer up view of the storm. We still do have a tornado watch that includes areas from just north of West Palm Beach all the way up towards the Space Coast. I haven't heard of any confirmed tornadoes today. Yesterday we had about 6, so that's good that we didn't have any. We don't really have a lot of spiraling bands away from the center of the storm, so that's been a little bit helpful. And you can see here, there's the outline of our tornado watch. As far as the center of the storm, it's now exiting Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda, and now it's starting to head towards central Florida. If you want want to go to one location that's had a really rough go with this, from Captiva down to Sanibel Island, still that outer eye wall is still just raking right into the area. So, you know, Hallie, it's just sad and it's heartbreaking. There's so many people out there that evacuated and left that are watching us from somewhere else, and all they want to know is, how's my house?
It's exactly right.
They want to know what's left of my house. Does anyone have any information whatsoever? And that's, you know, we'll get that in the next day or two, but you feel for those people.
I was just talking to one of the mayors down there, Cape Coral, Fort Myers Beach, spoke with both of them today, and they're talking about the same thing, Bill, because they had evacuated, obviously, further inland here. One of them had been in touch with folks who did not evacuate, who were still on the island, texting him pictures, you know, of just totally underwater, totally smoked. And that is more of what we're going to see because, as you point out, it is tough to get crews and equipment into some of these places that are the hardest hit.
I mean, all indications are in the Fort Myers area that the water may have made it all the way to Interstate 75, which is about 8 to 9 miles from the ocean. So if you go and, you know, call it up on Google Maps or wherever, look at your phone and see how far away Interstate 75 is from the ocean, and then how many houses and, you know, villages and communities are in between that. And possibly, if not likely, all of those places have had water damage. And that's going to be one of the big stories. You know, that water is going to recede. So when these people return, they're going to come home to a house and they'll see a line on their wall where the water got up to. And then they got to be like, what do we do? How do we fix this? We got to tear the floors up. We got to pull the carpets. We got to get new sheetrock put in, because you can't be in Florida with, you know, water damage in your walls, because the mold is going to grow like crazy.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, that's not just like one community. I mean, we're talking the possibility of hundreds of thousands of people dealing with that same issue.
Bill Cairns, thank you for being on top of that track for us. Appreciate it. Yeah. I want to bring in now Craig Fugate, the former head of FEMA under former President Obama, who is in Gainesville for us. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, you are somebody who we wanted to have you on because you know hurricanes. Irene, Sandy happened on your watch when you were at FEMA, but you've talked about other storms like Charlie, which you think don't even come close to Ian. Explain that. Why?
Well, I was the state director during Charlie for Governor Bush, and you could take Charlie and the hurricane force winds it had and basically put it inside the eye wall of Ian. It was like a 10-mile wide tornado. And because it was so compact, it didn't produce the storm surge that we're seeing with Ian. And the other thing was Charlie was fast moving, so we didn't get heavy rain in the interior state. We got wind damage, but it was very concentrated. Ian's going to do everything you don't want from a hurricane. We've already seen the impacts of storm surge. We got a very large wind field. This is going to cause trees to come down, power outage, damage to homes. And because it's not moving as fast, the risk, as you heard earlier, of extreme rainfall events of 1 foot to 2 feet. In Central Florida is actually had above average rainfall this summer. So it's pretty saturated. There's not going to be a lot of places for this water to go, except it's going to go up and get into people's homes.
So is that your biggest concern right now? Is it the flooding potential of places further inland?
Well, the biggest concern is the storm surge and, you know, how quickly the rescue teams can get into those areas. Yeah. Because we still got to make sure that people did stay behind. They're going to have to get in there. But this is, you know, think of this as, you know, 3D chess. You've got to respond to what's already been hit. You still got areas that haven't even gotten the experience of the storm yet that are going to get hit. And you're going to have to respond now from an area down in Southwest Florida all the way up to the East Coast, and now potentially looking at impacts as far north as Jacksonville and then up into the, you know, Georgia and the Carolinas. So for, you know, the state of Florida, this is pretty much all of the state peninsula is at some risk of impacts, and those impacts in some areas haven't been felt yet. They'll be occurring tonight and into tomorrow.
Because we just talked with Bill Cairns, our meteorologist here, who talked about the track of this storm, right? Because it is not going to just evaporate once Ian gets further into the Central Coast, right? You got North Carolina, South Carolina now on alert with these watches and warnings in place over the next, let's say, 48 hours or so. There is such a thing, and I know you know this well, of like response fatigue in some ways. How do you think about that when there's storms on storms, right? Disaster on the coast of Florida, devastation in the middle of Florida, in the central part of it, more destruction headed toward the coast of the Carolinas?
Well, it's like, you know, FEMA, they were in Puerto Rico, they were in Alaska, they got, you know, 2 storms there. Now they got Florida, they potentially got some more states. And it's really got to prioritize. There will be a lot of things that need to get done, but because you got so many areas of impact, you got to focus on the most critical thing, and that's life-saving. So FEMA's already moved additional urban search and rescue teams to support Governor DeSantis and the State Emergency Operations Center, and they're focusing on these things. They're going to focus on life-saving. They're going to focus on the immediate needs supporting the state as they set the stage for recovery, and that's not going to be the same throughout the state. There are going to be some parts of Florida that will move faster into recovery because they didn't have the heavy impacts, while they're still doing a lot of work just to get power on, particularly closer down in the southwest area.
So for folks who might be listening or watching and wondering, okay, so when does the power get back on, right? How long does it take with a monster storm like this? And I think to put it into context is important here. The 5th most powerful storm based on wind speed to ever hit the United States. The most recent one we had that was stronger wind speed at landfall, 155 miles an hour or higher, was Michael back a few years ago here. How long is it going to take after a storm like this, for these responders to get in, for those utility trucks? We've seen these convoys of trucks heading down the highway, right, heading south towards Florida to help. What's the turnaround time on something like that?
Well, it's going to depend. I mean, if the distribution system is up and running, it will go faster. I would tell people, you need to be planning for power outages for days to weeks. More rural areas may be harder to get to, areas with heavy damage. Even when the power comes on, people will have damage to their homes. They may not be able to have the power hooked up until they can make repairs. So this will be what we would call a long duration power outage. Some areas will come up quicker, some areas will take longer, but we're not going to know until the storm gets through how much damage there was to the grid and what's going to have to take place to start getting power back into these hard-hit areas.
Climate change is such a huge part of this, too. We're seeing storms get stronger and more powerful. We saw the rapid intensification specifically of this storm. That's not going away either.
Yeah, I mean, warmer water. I mean, this is the thing that we have seen is that these storms feed on the energy of the warmer water. So when you got warmer waters, and again, some of the record-setting events we're seeing, people will say, well, this is an individual event, but think of how many record-setting events we're having back-to-back. So we're seeing this, particularly with heavy rainfall. We're seeing the amplification of intensification, and these things are being measured. They're being reported. These are peer-reviewed panels. So it is causing that, it's probably hard to say it's causing the hurricane, but we are seeing things like rapid intensification and more extreme rainfall events more.
And there goes Craig in Gainesville for us. Craig Fugate, the FEMA head. We thank him for joining us. Apologies for the abrupt ending. But listen, that is what is happening when you've got this storm passing through. Power outages happening everywhere, et cetera. Comms are tricky. Comms are real tricky in Sarasota, where the city's mayor says they're getting ready for what's to come. The mayor is joining us now on the phone because I understand that you have also lost power. Your shot has also dropped out. That's why you're calling in. We're looking at a map of sort of where you are. Tell me what you're seeing outside.
I'm seeing a lot of wind. It's picking up. It was before, it was in the 70s, 70 miles an hour. Now it's probably more. It's intensifying. People keep texting me that they're losing power one by one. As of a few hours ago, as of 2 o'clock, actually 1:30, there were 22,000 people without power. I suspect that number is significantly higher, in the hundreds of thousands at this point. And I know that FPL, Florida Power and Light, is actively working on getting those back up and running. So the number varies almost by the minute.
And no idea of when the power is going to get back on, Mayor Arroyo. Tell me about the shelter and the capacities that you have at shelters, because I know you have 12 of them, about a dozen in the county. Are you satisfied with the number of people that have evacuated? Do you think people heeded the warning to get out?
A lot of them did. We have 3,800 individuals approximately in the shelters currently. And but some people chose to just stay back, and that's a personal choice. They understand that there's a drastic, there's a very high chance of danger and of storm surges and flooding, and they just chose to assume that risk.
We're looking at a few things. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just clarify because people aren't obviously looking at you because you had to call in because, again, the power is out where you are. We were showing a couple of images. On the bottom right of your screen is a live shot now, again, from the Tampa Bay area. The radar, the live track, the live storm track, as we are watching every minute of this storm, is just above that. And then we're seeing some images, too, of what appear to be crews having been trying to work before the storm hit. Some of the Emergency Operations Center. We've been showing you a NASA satellite, too, just to show the scale and the scope of this storm. Mayor Arroyo, you were talking about sort of the response time, the need now for people to play it safe, essentially, hunker down where you are. You need to stay hunkered. At what point do you anticipate some of those responders being able to get out to folks who might need it?
You know, when the conditions become normal or within a normal range, let's say wind speeds of under 40 miles an hour, they would send them back out. But honestly, I mean, our main priority is the safety of our residents. And we sort of train for this as a coastal town. So we've been preparing for years. We've elevated some roads. And even this, we called the state of emergency prior to it becoming a hurricane when it was still a tropical storm. So we activated our emergency operations center. We were repeatedly telling people to evacuate Zone A, which is the barrier islands and those living on the coast, and those living in boats and trailers and RVs. While closely monitoring the situation, I received a full briefing from our staff. Our utilities department checked that the generators were ready and up and running. Public Works began clearing out storm drains last week. We fortified buildings. We cleaned out the Parks and Recreation Department, cleaned out the parks for projectiles. Fuel farms were operational, ready to go. FPL was ready to Florida Power and Light was ready to go. Our police was ready to go. So we're as prepared as we can be for something of this magnitude.
Yeah. Living along the coast, you kind of have to be, although this magnitude, as you well know, is incredibly intense. Mayor Eric Arroyo, thank you so much from Sarasota. A lot of people thinking about you, hoping that you stay safe and that your community recovers quickly from this. You are looking live now at our Jesse Kirsch, who is live in the Orlando area. And Jesse, you know, we have just heard now from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who says his meteorologists, right, this is from the governor, think the storm surge has peaked so far at 12 feet. 911 calls are being rerouted in some counties. This is news that we are just now getting into us in the last not even 90 seconds or so. There are some people who are stuck in these zones where responders cannot get to them, who are calling 911, and those calls are getting rerouted. The concern now, major flooding north of where you are, Jesse. Obviously, you are starting to get those first bands of rain. Even more further north where Jacksonville, for example, set to get it. Talk me through what you're seeing.
Yeah, so Hallie, the weather has been deteriorating throughout the afternoon here, and what I want to stress to people is what you're seeing right now are Ian's northern bands. The heart of the storm is not expected here for hours. It made landfall more than 100 miles from where I am right now, but to give you an idea of how strong this storm is, we are already seeing strong winds and rain pummeling this area as we continue to get these strong gusts. It has really picked up in the last 5 minutes or so. Officials here are concerned about potentially 90-mile-per-hour winds and up to 2 feet of rain in some parts, which could lead to flash flooding. As of this afternoon, officials have asked people to no longer be on the road. So at this point, people should be where they're going to ride out the storm in this part of the state. And even beyond Ian's direct path, we've already seen nearly a dozen potential tornadoes touch down. We've seen small airplanes tossed around. And again, all the way here, more than 100 miles away, where we expect the storm's worst in the overnight to early morning hours, the worst is still yet to come. And it's not necessarily going to be about the wind. It's going to be about the potential threat of flooding. Again, we are looking at possibly 2 feet of rain in some parts of this area. And obviously, you and I in recent days have been talking about the drastic impacts flooding can have on communities in this country.
How about tornado watches, Jesse? That's a concern, too, in the Orlando area.
Yeah, that's something that is on residents' mind. We have been getting alerts on our phone just about the general threat of all kinds of severe weather that has already been making its way through here over the last day or so throughout Florida. And I flew in yesterday into Miami, so on the eastern coast of the state. And even over there, it was clear that something bad was brewing in Florida. So it just gives you an idea of how powerful Ian is, even as it was making its way toward shore before landfall. You talk about those tornado threats. I spoke with a man who brought his baby boy, his young daughter, his wife, and they were meeting other family members at a shelter here in the Orlando area. And he told me one of the things on his mind that made them make the decision to come to the shelter was the threat of tornadoes in the area. So that is just one of the things that is at risk right now in this part of Florida. And again, we are still hours away, Hallie. I cannot stress that enough. We are seeing right now, this is just a preamble to what we're expecting here.
Have you seen many? I know your backdrop there looks to be like a pond. I don't know if you're on a golf course or near or whatever, Jess, but have you seen many cars or people out in this? My hope is the answer is no, but like, are people taking it seriously considering that they are not on the coast, they're far further inland?
Yeah, and well, I think you just heard, if I heard correctly, a car just went by me. We have seen a couple cars driving by, but largely the roads have been ghost towns. There was one man I interviewed outside of a shelter who was going away, who's going to come back in a couple of hours, which again, officials have been stressing against. Even though we don't expect Ian here in the Orlando area until tomorrow morning, officials are asking people at this point to stay in place. And just to give you some context on how powerful these little pops of wind can already be, as you can see, we're getting hit by another gust right now. Hallie, we've been riding around in a Chevy Suburban, one of those giant SUVs, okay? And we've got a lot of gear in that car. This wind has been strong enough that when I've been sitting in that car a couple different times, that Suburban has been wobbling. So that is how strong this wind already is. You can see the trees blowing right where we are. We're not on the golf course. Hopefully no one's playing out on a golf course right now. You're not going to be hitting them straight, I'll tell you that much, if you're trying to sneak 9 or 18 holes in right now. But again, I mean, jokes aside, officials are telling people to get somewhere safe right now because we're still hours away and it's light out. The other concern about early morning, overnight hours, obviously, is that when it's dark, you can't see what's coming your way. And if you're on the roads in rain on a good day, that's not something you want to be doing, and certainly not when you've got the remnants, potentially still a hurricane, but certainly at least the remnants of it coming your way here in the Orlando area. And someone from our climate team, one of our amazing members of our climate team, Catherine, who I've been speaking with throughout the day, told me that Ian really sticks out because it is going to continue to pummel Florida straight across from west to east, and it's obviously making its way up the East Coast beyond Florida, too.
I only asked about the golf course thing, Jesse, because I can see this fountain basically blowing sideways behind you at this point. And what I think is so important, and I want to share with folks, again, the Florida governor briefing now, power outages up to 1.1 million. We expect that number to grow. That is a number that we reported even 30 minutes ago. You have to think, given what we're seeing where you are, that's going to continue to intensify. They've got 100 portable cell towers ready to deploy. The key point is once it is safe to do so. And Jesse, you make an important point that this thing, as we look at the track in the upper left hand of the screen, however you're watching on your stream, it is cutting, it is slicing through Florida, and then it's heading up towards the Carolinas coast.
Yeah, and, you know, you talk about those outages and cell towers, so I can tell you right now in the Orlando area, power outages so far have been minimal. And, again, that's another one of those bigger gusts. These have really been picking up, and you see a car's driving by right now, Hallie. So, again, this is, you know, against the advice of officials here. They want people in place. If we're talking about a Suburban wobbling, you don't want to be in any car out there. You talk about cell reception and power issues. So far, cell reception is holding strong here from what I can tell. We haven't heard reports of too many power outages yet compared to people on the western coast. Again, we're hours away from the worst of what we're going to see from Ian here in the Orlando area. One notable thing, though, we do have at least one shelter here in the county where Orlando sits that, according to officials, has reached capacity, and 2 more shelters have been added to the list at this late hour. So they are still expecting people potentially, despite the fact that officials wanted people in place already, they are still opening more doors, hoping people will seek shelter, because obviously something, Hallie, to keep in mind is, again, it's not necessarily the wind gust that is going to be the most dangerous thing here. It is going to be that potential for flash flooding, the severe weather that is coming with this storm. And obviously, you got to imagine people are not going to be sleeping tonight, and I certainly know our team won't be. We're going to be out here overnight reporting throughout the hours on the latest developments, but I don't think I necessarily want to be sleeping anyway, because you don't know exactly where that flooding could hit, right? That flash flooding. And that's something that we know from recent events we've covered can happen very quickly, very unexpectedly, and it doesn't take long to get untenable. So, we're obviously going to be keeping an eye on if we need to get to higher elevation. We have access to that, thankfully. And hopefully other people out there are heeding those warnings, too.
Jesse Kirsch, a long night ahead of you there in Orlando. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. We're going to sneak in a real quick break. We've got an update from the National Hurricane Center when we're back. We are back now as we are covering here this Category 4 storm, Hurricane Ian. And just to reset here at the bottom of the hour, I want to make sure you understand what you're seeing here. That is, of course, the live radar in the top left-hand corner of your screen. Now you're looking at the live shot of the Tampa Bay Bridge, the Sky Bridge that is obviously closed. Look how high that water actually is. And Tampa isn't even the worst of it, right? Because the storm, its biggest impact is being felt further south right now in the area near Fort Myers and Cape Coral. That is kind of the bullseye for where Ian has made landfall just within the last maybe 2-3 hours or so. Typically, the storm weakens as it comes on land, right? But here's what this storm is going to do. It's going to slow down. It's going to drop a ton of rain. It's going to create major concerns about flooding for that reason, especially, by the way, in a spot like Cape Coral, which has some 400 miles of canals in that city, right? Everybody basically lives within 50 feet of water, practically. So the concern there is the rain, the slowdown, and the fact that the backside of this storm, the back of that eye wall there, that is also very powerful. You don't see that in every hurricane. This one, you're seeing it. We say Category 4 because it hit land at 155 miles an hour. Just shy, barely, of a Category 5. When the storm is this strong, it almost becomes irrelevant what category it actually is. This is powerful. This is among the top 5 hurricanes to ever hit the U.S. when you measure it by wind speed. I want to go now to one of our guests from the National Hurricane Center. Let me bring in here, I believe we have that guest. Excuse me, Cheryl Berberich, not from the National Hurricane Center. She is, in fact, from Fort Myers, Florida. And Cheryl, I understand that you, let me just tell people who you are. You're stuck in Fort Myers. What's going on? Tell us about it.
Yes, we've been down here a little over a week, and we own a condo here. Okay. And we were due to fly out on Tuesday, and they canceled the flight at the last moment. So they had issued warnings for everybody here. But talking to the other people that are full-time tenants of this building said, you know, it's not supposed to hit us directly. We've ridden through this many times. So as long as you have, food and water, you can ride it out. And so that's what we did. And now it's been terrible.
I'm sorry. What have you been going through? First of all, are you okay? Are you safe?
Yes, we're good. We're inside our home. We are taking on some water, but not too much at the moment.
Outside, is any wind damage where you are? What are you seeing?
Oh my God, you wouldn't believe the damage. We saw our car float away back when the winds picked up, and there are so many cars that are just floating around in our parking lot, and a couple of the parking garages have collapsed. We've seen furniture and mattresses from the hotel nearby, just over, and floating down with the sheets and everything still on them. And refrigerators, we've seen, believe it or not, refrigerators are floating.
I believe it. You know, you said parking garages have collapsed. Do you mean entirely, like the structures have come down?
They are actually, big structures that have a roof over them and several parking spots, but they have come down. Two of them are completely down. One is on its way. And like I said, many cars are floating around here.
Have you called or tried to get help at all, Cheryl, or are you just in it now for the long haul until the storm passes?
We just have to be in it now for the long haul. The main road down the island is flooded, and the bridges at both ends are closed. And so we were just instructed to stay here and be safe, and they'll let us know when it's safe to venture outside. Instructed by city officials? Yes. The sheriff, Lee County Sheriff's Department, they're the ones deciding it. I imagine that if you could go back in time, Cheryl, safe to say that you might have made a different call a little earlier? Oh, absolutely. We were vacationing, and we were really unaware that there was a storm building and headed our way until everybody kind of talked about it on the beach and at the pool on Monday. And so then after that, we were like, well, we should pay attention to what's going on. Yes, and the airlines, we tried to see if we could get out of Tampa or Orlando, and the flights were all booked. we were willing to drive even to Miami if we could get a flight out, but there was nothing available at that point.
Yeah. And you have food and phone chargers and all that for the next, 24 hours or so?
We do. We actually went to the store last night and decided that we probably should get some things, and that was a good decision.
Okay.
We have no electricity to do it, but we're okay. We're hanging in there.
Okay. Cheryl Berberich, stranded there in Fort Myers. Cheryl, obviously, please stay safe. We're thinking about you. Thank you for joining us to share a bit of your experience there, right where Ian, this Category 4 storm, has made a direct hit. Cheryl Berberich, thank you. And thanks to all of you for watching. Obviously, a busy hour of developing news, breaking news. We'll have more coming up. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, for even more. Have a good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.